Hello everyone, I'm John Evans. Welcome to another episode of One-on-One. The 2019 Atlantic hurricane season is underway. And after what happened in 2018 with Hurricane Florence, a lot of people are on edge, wanting to make sure they're prepared in case the worst happens again this year. That's why I decided to ask WECT's Chief Meteorologist Gannon Medwick to come in for a podcast interview. I wanted to talk to Gannon about what we learned, not just from Florence in 2018, but Matthew in 2016, and how we can take all of that information to make ourselves better prepared for what we could face this year. Gannon Medwick, WECT Chief Meteorologist, husband, father, dog owner, all-around good guy. Welcome to the One-on-One with John Evans podcast, buddy.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
We're getting into a new hurricane season. As we get into these seasons, what is your mindset? Where do you go mentally as the season begins?
I think about what we would need to do to cover a storm on the approach, during, and after. Has that changed from the year before? Usually that answer is no, or only slightly. And then I also think about, okay, what do we think the season's going to do? Well, there's some parameters that say active season versus inactive season. This year, those signals are mixed. Then the place I always go back to is it's only going to take one storm to make a difference if it hits where we live. So no matter what the extra noise might be, El Nino, not El Nino, African rain patterns above, down, doesn't matter. We've got our eyes on the Cape Fear region, and we know it only takes one to make a difference.
Is that the biggest lesson that we've learned the last 3 years with Florence last year, Matthew 3 years ago?
Oh, well, yeah, it brings to the forefront that we're vulnerable, because we could go through lulls and we say, okay, well, they always slip east of the Outer Banks, so maybe the climate's changing. We live on the coast.
Right.
We know we're vulnerable. These storms make us realize that. I think the biggest lesson from Matthew and Florence are just let's focus on impacts over categories and labels.
And that's the one thing you've really pushed the last couple of years.
Yeah, for sure. Because I was in your old TV market, Greenville, New Bern.
Right.
So I've been my whole career on the Carolina coast. And between Greenville, New Bern, and here, and it just struck me early on how people are focused on those categories. I get why, because it's something you can point to. It's something, well, there's a 3, and we know about a 3. There's a 4, a 5. Oh my goodness!
Right.
And then and they generally relate to that outcome. There's some proportionality there. For instance, a category 1 usually doesn't produce the surge that a 4 or a 5 does. It's just physics. But then once you quickly look under the hood, a lot of that breaks down. For instance, Florence would be the poster child of that.
Right.
Category 1 at landfall, weakening on approach. The categories are maximum sustained winds. Then you line up every other parameter that a storm can do. Florence was like setting the records, or at least maximum gusts, even not even sustained winds. Gusts, Wilmington, second highest ever.
Right.
So it beat
Floyd, Fran, everything else.
Fran, Hazel, all the benchmark storms, and then right down the list: tornado potential, all the things you need to think about. Think about geography too. I mean, the way Florence came in directly. A lot of the ones in history will either skirt or come up from a different direction. It's a difference between a sideswipe collision and a T-bone collision. I mean, it's a huge difference.
Yeah.
And so we want to use Florence to really hopefully bang that message home. Each storm is going to be different, and we need to look at the impacts closely versus the cursory labels. You've
had, at least to this date, where as we tape this, we're about almost a week into hurricane season now, but you've had a couple of community chats in the area. You had one up in Surf City, had one down in St. James. I know there are more planned. As you talk to people at these chats and in the community, what are they saying to you? Are they now, do you think, more prepared going forward for having been through these two storms? Did they learn lessons maybe from extended evacuations and flooding that we've never seen in some areas in the past?
Yeah, everyone has had a different story and a different individual experience. I think the commonality is that Florence was something that really brought us into tune with our hurricane plan. Everything was dialed in. By necessity, we had to dial it in. In some cases, people were saying, man, we had this to do, and it was kind of harrowing in those last 36 hours to shore this thing up. But then we got it done, and then now we know this year we need to have that thing done ahead of time. And it's also, like I talked to a couple of people in Surf City in particular, they still has some repairs to make and still had something in their upper floor or whatnot, and they're just like, man, it's hurricane season again. So we're going to get on that, you know, because things and contractors, time just goes on, and here we are again. And I think that's the main takeaway is we honed our plan, we put it into practice, and we were able to kind of flesh out the bugs. So hopefully we'll be ready to go 100% on all cylinders this year.
In all those times, and I know we did the 30-minute special on Hurricane Florence, and you know, we talked to people in the community about what it was like, but there was a period of time during our coverage, you know, we kept going and we went in those 12-hour sessions, but that Saturday night when we were getting tornado warnings, and for those of you who don't know, part of our building here was literally coming down. We were battling water, not going into our control room. And you and Eric and everybody in the First Alert Weather Team, literally, when a tornado warning was for our building, you had to come out of the studio and do weather from a brick-lined hallway out here.
And we had to stop you from operating the shop vac.
Well, we were fighting all that.
If you don't know, now you know.
We were fighting to keep the water out of major things, but you guys were on the air when these tornado warnings were coming, and you're walking and still talking and still trying to deliver that most harrowing moment of your career?
Yeah, one of them. I would say this storm collectively. I would put, for personally, it was that Friday night. It was the night before, because of what you mentioned. Some of the compromising injuries to the building kind of forced us to move our stuff and move. So I moved 5 times that night before, including, you know, walking through flooded parking lots. That was just weird. That was a personal note. So if you asked me that, I'd point to that Friday. The way the schedule worked out, I feel like Eric and Kelly, we were kind of on rotating shifts, and to a large extent Jess, they probably handled 75 to 80% of the tornado warnings, and then when Gabe and I got in on that Saturday night, we were kind of dealing with the tail end of the tornado warning. You guys were doing yeoman's work as we were to continue to shore up the building. I remember that, but I do remember that night when it was like, okay, we need to practice what we preach. Our forecast center faces this wall to the south. We're not in an interior room. That's just facts. So we made our way back through the hallways where you guys were, you know, continuing to just make sure that we weren't going to lose the building and all that.
Brooms, shop vacs,
I remember our now news director Brad was saying, "Oh, hey guys, hold up! They're doing a tornado warning." Yeah. I'll never forget that. But so many elements to that storm, we'll never forget. And as crazy as that night was, I'd probably have to give, on a personal note, the edge to Friday, and just in terms of, you know, where we were nomadic. Friday night.
When did you first get interested in television? I know you're a Wilmington native, not Wilmington, North Carolina, Wilmington, Delaware, grew up there, but when did weather first get on Gannon's radar, if you pardon the pun?
Yeah, I love the pun. Weather got on radar before television. So I would probably say early seeds were some of the storms I would see as a kid. I have a faint memory of Hurricane Gloria in 1985, sort of a glancing shot to Delaware, more so to the Jersey Shore. But I remember, you remember feelings a lot, you know? I remember a tense sort of air with, we got this storm. And in the mid-'80s, storm tracking was not what it is now. So there was a lot of question marks. And then other storms. Got into school after high school at Penn State to study weather, and then I would say the television aspect was more toward my junior or senior year, kind of late in the game. I'll never forget Heidi, one of our teaching assistants, basically threatened to beat me up if I didn't go into a radio booth. I need you to do campus radio. Okay, I do it. I kind of like this. And she's like, you better do campus TV. And so I did. I kind of liked it. I caught that element of it there. So progressively, I know some individuals, it's like, as soon as I was conscious, I was into weather and TV weather. For me, it was more of a progression, the weather first, then the TV.
And science, did you like science in school, high school, and everything else like that? So, I mean, obviously with what you do, there's a lot of science involved.
Yeah, sure did. I like, the science is kind of like sports too, and they're kind of the same. You have knowns and unknowns, you have variables, you have a way to attack a problem. And I kind of saw that in science. There's some discovery to be had, and that always appealed to me.
There were some guys when I was growing up in Pennsylvania. I can remember some of those first anchors that I remember watching, whether it be the Philadelphia market, Larry Kane, or some of those others that I remember growing up watching. Do you have weather guys that you remember, the Jim O'Briens of the Philadelphia market that you remember as a kid that maybe you think back to and say, I kind of got me interested in that?
Yeah, I don't remember the late Jim O'Brien. I think there was Herb Clark, who was one of them. And then there was John Bolaris was one when I was a kid. He was kind of the name that was thrown out. If anything was coming, no matter what station you would watch first, it was, what did John say about that? So there was kind of, so, and then another guy in the Lancaster-Harrisburg market ended up interning under him, Joe Calhoun. He's a good guy. Actually, I like to remind him, he graduated from Penn State the year I was born. So it's one of those, friendly jabs about, I'll get them, from the younger millennials. They say, oh yeah, you're this old, okay. But he was always measured in the way he went about delivering a forecast, and I appreciated that. Your highs aren't too high, your lows aren't too low. I'm just going to give it to you straight, and I kind of like that.
And why Penn State?
For me, I was in state at the time, so Wilmington, Delaware is about the size of a thumbtack in many instances. You look at a map, you're like, where is it? And so we actually moved. My family moved just a few miles, and we were across the state line by the time I was in high school. And so it was in-state tuition. That's huge.
Yes.
And also my father and my uncle and some of us at Penn State family, so we kind of had the history of going up to football games. It was just a natural fit. Only place I ever applied. Yeah.
And isn't State College, if I'm not mistaken, isn't that where AccuWeather was headquartered out that way? Was that a draw? Did you know about that going in, or was it more Penn State and then learned about AccuWeather?
More Penn State, but I knew about AccuWeather. Dr. Joel Myers, who founded AccuWeather, was a Penn Stater, native Philadelphian, and just sort of established his empire, really, just in the shadow of the campus. And it's really worked out to, I think, a benefit to both institutions. I mean, they get a lot of people to go into AccuWeather right from Penn State who either interned there, who are already living there, so they get a nice pipeline of talent. And then, Dr. Myers has given back. Actually, since I left, they redid the weather center up there, made it all digital. When I was there, the maps would constantly print, and it was hanging maps was part of the thing. So, yeah.
And when you were at Penn State, obviously there's the football team. Paterno was still the coach at that point in time. Many people put him up on that pedestal as that real icon. And then you see what happened in the years later. As a Penn Stater, how did that affect you?
Well, I keep it 100%. I think that was a man who was so focused. Anybody can think and take away what they want to take away, but I forgive him for any. I think he was so focused on 3 F's: football, family, and faith. And through doing whatever reason, I've read a couple of books on this situation. His coaching staff, including Sandusky, they were kind of on islands. He was like, Sandusky was the defensive guy. You do your thing, you do, I don't have time, And so Joe was the head. He was calling the shots, but everything I heard is they were kind of like in different orbits, and they didn't cross a whole lot. So Who knows? Who knows what's in a man's heart?
Right. Yeah, it's tough.
It's one of those things. When I was watching, I was just like, this is so tragic. Is to be tied, at least to have gone through that institution and see there's some things wrong here to whatever level that they may go, and then of course to think about the victims of that kind of crime. Nobody likes to think about that.
As I grew up, I grew up in the not far from Penn State in Pennsylvania, and where I grew up, it was either you loved Penn State or you loved Notre Dame. I mean, those were the two those were the two camps. Yeah. And one of the first persons I interviewed and was nervous interviewing as an intern was Joe Paterno, because I had growing up in PA, I had watched his teams, and I finally got a chance when I was an intern at a television station in Wilkes-Barre, Scranton, had a chance to go to a Penn State media day, and the mic flag was probably shaking when I
can imagine. I'm shaking just thinking about it. Yeah.
And that was one of the first, I can remember one of the first big interviews that I ever did. You said you interned.
How did they treat you?
Very nicely.
Yeah.
Very nicely. Yeah.
And that's another reason why I am, and I try to be this way in everything, is generous with the benefit of a doubt.
Yes.
And because everything that I had ever heard about Joe Paterno, I met him once, and he was nice and cheerful, has been always about treating young people with dignity. Yeah. I mean, and he would go into the cities from which he would recruit and the youth, and he's like, no, you make sure your grades are okay, make sure, and I just couldn't see it making that hard turn at the end.
I still remember the one question, and again, I'm 22 at the time, 23, and the first game of the year maybe was Boston College Rutgers. It was somebody who wasn't obviously of Penn State's talent level, and I said, I think the question I may have asked him was, what about Boston College Rutgers? What about Boston College scares you? Is the first game of the year, and I meant to say, well, they're great offensively, and he said, well, nothing scares me about Boston College, but their talent level is really good. And he could have really ripped me apart.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Right.
But he treated me as okay, this kid's young, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt, let's kind of go with it. And I can remember that interview, and again, the fortunes of what happened aside. As a young broadcaster, he treated me very well, and this was 1983 at the time, whatever it was.
It was right when he was winning championships.
Yeah.
And I like hear stories like that. And I don't know if he coined this phrase, but I know he was big on this phrase and this idea, and I take it into weather forecasting, is you're never as good as you think you are when you win, and you're never as bad as you think you are when you lose. And I thought, wow, that's deep. You know what I mean? Winning masks everything. You have a good run of forecasting, like, sure,
there you go.
Mama Nature can humble you real quick, you know what I mean?
Yeah,
but then you're never as bad. So I like that. I like that ethic as well.
You interned, you said, in the Harrisburg market while you were at Penn State. Do you remember that first time seeing yourself on TV and kind of like, oh man, I got a lot to learn, or hey, I'm pretty good at this? What was the reaction? Do you remember?
I think it was more toward the former. Yeah. it was never one where I was like, oh, I hate the sound of my voice, or I hate how I look. I was never like that. I was never beyond the pale. But I was looking at myself and probably I got some work to do. But I tried to have fun the first time. Like, hey, I'm talking about weather, something that I'm interested in. And I get a chance to sort of play within myself, who I am, but then, add some color to it and see if I can get what's in here to come out here in a sensible way. And so that was a cool challenge. And the internship was a great way to exercise.
When you got that first job, NCT in Greenville, WNCT, correct?
Full-time job.
And what was that like for Gannon?
Well, the first hurdle, at least mentally, was first it was cool, and I knew I was in a great area.
That was 2004, I think, somewhere around there?
2004, yeah. And I knew I was in a great area, period, at the end of that sentence, and a great area for weather. The first mental hurdle was kind of, because it was a morning gig, and I had never considered myself a morning person. Not a night owl either. I guess I just never thought of it. Right. But John, if I saw 3 a.m., it's because I stayed up to 3 a.m.
Right.
It's not because I was getting up at 3 a.m.
Right.
This job was going to require me to do that. By the end of the first week, I was like, I kind of like this.
Really?
I kind of like getting up and getting after it. And so that was a big takeaway from the first few days of that. Hit a stride early, and then to what we were just talking about earlier about thinking, hey, I got this. Yeah. And then suddenly your bicycle tire hits a pebble and you fall off the bike. There was a snowstorm 3 or 4 months in that I missed. Everybody missed it.
Yeah.
Now, usually it's, hey, it's going to snow. Oh, it's just rain. No, this was the opposite. It was like, hey, it's going to snow a little bit. Next morning, between Bath and Bellhaven, they had 6-foot drifts over Highway 264. Wow. So we missed it by a lot. Weather Service missed it. So we were kind of like in the humble population of meteorologists after that one. But that was a big wake-up call. That happened early on at NCT.
And let's go off this, take this exit here. Nightside meteorologist, morning meteorologist. It's a different gig altogether.
Yeah.
People may not realize that. They say, well, you're telling the forecast and you're giving everything else like that. You put things together the same way, but you present in a whole different norm, night side versus mornings.
Yeah, there's that, and as soon as you start speaking in generalities, we always need to be sensitive to the exception. People do work third and second shift.
Right.
People do work different kind of things, and people have different lifestyles. So we understand that, and we're sensitive to it. But by and large, night side is kind of like, yeah, you're probably going to bed pretty soon. And so the next important thing is the next day. And then there's also a sort of newscast of record ethic that goes on, that we have better be talking about the next big thing and putting that in its proper framework. In the morning, by and large, that's the get up and go. So I find myself saying the time and the temperature a lot. A lot of it is just like, hey, this is your first look at things of the day. So a lot of it is what's right in front of us is most important.
Yeah.
But then as a first alert station, we know that we can't go too far without talking about that next big thing that people are going to be needing to be alert for, be that 3-7 days down the road or whatever. Yeah. So that needs to mix in too.
Yeah, you're basically getting them up and saying, okay, when kids are at the bus stop in an hour, this is what it's going to be like when they come back. So you're pushing them out the door in the morning. At night, you're bringing them back in. Okay, when you get up tomorrow. So it's a different kind of mindset.
Yeah, and in the morning we have graphics that literally say 7, 8, 9 a.m. That wouldn't make as much sense at 11 to say midnight, 1, 2 a.m.
Yeah.
You know, most people are all buttoned up for that time. There's always exceptions, I know, but yeah, that's a different kind of vibe.
Yeah. When did you decide that it was time to leave WNCT? Because I know you came down here as the chief meteorologist, but many of us at the end of a contract, we start looking for a job. Was Wilmington a place that you looked at and wanted to target, or did you want to stay in North Carolina, or was it just right place, right time?
It was mostly right place, right time, but yes, I did want to stay in the Carolinas. By that point, so I'd been there for this was going into my third contract cycle. So we already had 2 kids at that point, and it was getting to be the time where, because Claire was starting school, she was already in kindergarten, so it was getting to be the time where that inertia was really starting to pile up. And so we're going to make a move. We can't be willy-nilly. We can't say, oh, if this isn't right, we'll just move in 3 more years, you know?
Not with kids.
No, it becomes that much more, you become that much more weighted, and you have to make steps purposefully. And so, when it was time to move, I think, I mean, I'll be frank, I was kind of stuck in my position where I was then. Wasn't really getting a lot of traction to maybe move even laterally within the company. So I thought, I'm going to look into, I heard good things about, we were Raycom at the time, and this position to open up, and decided to go for it.
And it became, you came here to be chief. You were not chief where you were.
No,
so it was really a step
mm-hmm.
up in responsibility too.
Yeah, and we always have preached this here, and this was in the other place. You got to be a leader in whatever you do. But yeah, in terms of that title, in terms of the first thing comes down from corporate or news management, it hits me, and then we decide how we need to execute that. So yeah, it is I guess a step up in responsibility that I was sort of insulated from at NCT. But in terms of the market and the general, actually stepped down in market size, but I learned early on, who cares, really?
Market
it's about
size
quality
really is,
of life, quality of work, and I knew generally it was like low risk for me, because I know what Eastern North Carolina faces in terms of weather, and I know a good bit about Wilmington. I'm not coming from the opposite coast or anything like that. So yeah, it worked. Let's
talk a little bit about family. I've talked to several people in this podcast. Foz a couple of weeks ago, and I've talked to Sheriff John Ingram not too long ago, and I asked them about their wives. Our job is not 9 to 5. Neither were theirs. But early on, did your lovely wife realize that he's going to be gone a different time than most husbands might be? Sheila bought into that at an early time for me, and thank goodness, because our kids would never be as good as they are and as independent as they are.
Yeah.
How about your better half?
And they are. Your kids are awesome, all grown, and she got on board with that early. She realized the hours were weird. That's the first thing that's in your face, and then. The one thing that's been which camera am I on?
There you go.
Two or one. This device right here, and then the social media apps that are on it. When I got into this business in 2004, we had a little website that would service desktop, and we would write a little blurb, and that was the extent of digital. And maybe we had some auto updating features on that, but then since then it's like, I think MySpace was a thing, then Facebook, then Twitter, then Instagram, all the other platforms, and then the expectation would be to service those platforms. I am trying to embrace it. I mean, people ask me legitimate questions about storms. And if I'm waiting at the car wash, I'll answer that question.
Sure.
And sometimes my wife's looking over at me. Well, you gonna put that thing down? Yeah. So I've got to respect her and sometimes do that. So that's been a big thing. One story, April 16th, 2011, I say thank you to my wife all the time whenever I think of this, because big tornado outbreak in the Eastern Carolina. Elizabethtown got the EF3 in this market. Greenville, Newbern market was absolutely raked by tornadoes. It was all afternoon and all evening. My younger daughter had just been born earlier that week via C-section, so my wife was at home recovering, and I'm like, I'm gonna have to ask you to. Thankfully, she was recovering just miraculously. It was like day to day. It was almost like no one had cut her open and removed a baby. Wow! It was like that just happened to you. You know what? You ever think about how crazy that is in some level? But that just happened like 3-4 days ago, and now it was. Are you going to be okay? Are you going to be able to get into a closet or do it? And it turns out they did have to shelter.
Did they
at
really?
One point, yeah. And I got home and I was like. I'm sorry. I said that. I'm like, I'm sorry. And she's like, nah, I get it.
Yeah, it's amazing. And how about the kids, the girls? Is Dad being on TV still a cool thing for them, or?
Claire will hold Claire will never show you her cards. Yeah. So I don't think she ever gave me the benefit of calling it cool. So probably not. But the other one, Natalie. I think she has a legitimate interest in weather. Not just Dad. So she'll watch me and quote me. That's interesting.
That's neat.
Yeah, remember you talked about that? That's kind of neat. Yeah. So they could not be more different. I do, and I know you were probably the same. I know you were the same way. You want your kids to be their identity around at school, not like, oh, well, her dad does something like this.
Well, but the thing of it is one of the neat things is working the shift, and you worked a little on the night side when you first got here and then went to mornings.
Right.
But on the shift that I'm on and have been on for the bulk of my career, mornings were a time when I would actually go in and read to the kids at school and have lunch with them before I went to work. And so that's how I really carved out some special time for the kids. Going into the school, reading to the class, and then we'd go and we'd have lunch with them, and she'd invite some of her friends, and we'd go and sit off at a different table, and loved it.
That's
until
awesome
they got into middle school and stuff, and then it's like, okay, Dad, you don't.
What changes in middle school? I'm not.
You don't have to come anymore, Dad. We appreciate it. But I just wondered. I mean, you still go in and you're still pretty cool with the girls. You haven't gotten to that point yet where Dad's like, okay, Dad, you don't have to worry about coming into school anymore.
My older one is in middle school, so I just don't tread there, you know, unless asked. But the young one loves it. Yeah, it's pretty cool. The times I can go and visit her class or have lunch, like I was able to, since we work opposite schedules, I was able to carve out for my younger one's 8th birthday earlier this spring some time with her teacher, like last period, to come in and bring cupcakes or everything like that. And so that was a cool day. Yep.
Yeah, that's really kind of fun. People don't realize often that when you work at a TV station, and especially as we get ready and prepare for a hurricane, we've got to prepare earlier than most families do. Whether it's send wife and child away, whether it's send when Florence made Cat 4, I sent Sheila to Pennsylvania. You've had to do the same thing with your family too, correct?
Yeah, the first one was Irene, where I was still up in Greenville, New Bern, and so the projected track was a little more ominous there than here. For a time, it was more here. It kind of shifted. The cone shifted. Man, you golf. You shift it by a half a degree over time.
Oh, yeah.
It's so long. So, but when it became clear that, gosh, there's no way Carteret or Craven are going to avoid like really bad stuff, I actually had to, not playing the violin for myself, but I had to cancel. I was going to go to upstate New York, where my wife's from, and we were going to have a week there on the lake. I couldn't go. Yeah. She went. But that was good, because it's kind of like, well, they're going anyway. Yeah. So now it's just me and the dog, and then so that worked. Florence, we came to that, only we did not have a prescribed trip around that time. It was just a question of where would we rather ride this out, and they ultimately decided to stay, and I just swallowed hard. Okay, we'll have to trust our construction and her instincts, and her instincts have been proven to be pretty good over the years. I told you about the tornado thing after the C-section.
And plus her judgment is pretty good. She picked you out of the out of the ocean for a husband, so she's got some pretty good pretty good judgment.
Pour it on, John. Yeah. No, and so once but that's the thing about plans. Once you decide, you go full bore. We got calls, and I got some, speaking of social media, some questions. Hey, we got a hotel in Greensboro. Now that the category's down, we're thinking of coming back. No, stay. You're going to be running into a wall if you come back down. That kind of thing. So there's always like, it's never easy, is it?
No, it's not.
To your point, we have to get on it a little bit earlier, but whether you make that decision early or late, there are pluses and minuses to staying and going. There's no easy answer. What
makes it a good day when you walk out the door of this TV station, out that back door, and head to the parking lot? What makes it a good day? I had good shows today, in your mind.
That's a great question. I feel that way most days, so I feel like I did everything on time. Timing is so key, and I just have no regrets. I wish I didn't say that, or the forecast is not unfolding the way. That's probably the worst day, actually, when I say the sun's going to come out and the clouds linger, and I'm like, I'm disappointing some people right now, or it's late, or boy, these storms popped early. Considering we work with odds, but there's something binary about everybody wants to know, are we good or are we not? And then if it doesn't work out well, then that's a bad day. That's a day I'd be like, I wish I could have a do-over. But most days are good. I call it right. I feel like at least well enough. happy about the interactions I had with my coworkers. I didn't miss a hit, and when you have generally positive interactions on social media, that's a good day as well, because people can be behind a keyboard and say some detrimental things that they might not say in person.
That's where I was going to go next. Social media and email, some days, I'll get an email criticizing me for doing one thing and then an email criticizing me for doing something else. How much stock do you put into that? Does a bad email bother you and sit in there and gnaw at you till the next day, or can you kind of shake it off?
Less than it used to, because I think I just started finally wrapping my head around wrapping my brain around the idea that people can say anything behind a keyboard. That chances are they wouldn't say that to you in that way, face to face.
Oh, they won't. Yeah.
So I just think, well, this is a little keyboard courage, and I try not to be so like, no, I did it, so it must be right. I will examine the legitimacy, or try to examine the legitimacy of what's being said. Maybe this guy has a point, and then you just make the decision. You know how it is.
Sure.
Maybe let's consider that point. If it's people yelling at us for doing a tornado warning, I mean, we'd rather not have a risk of tornadoes in here. We live here too.
Yeah.
Selfishly, we'd rather be on break for lunch than be sitting here covering up your program on a tornado. Like, nobody wants this.
Yes.
But this is like, we have to. So when we get that kind of messaging, it's like, well, you're frustrated that you have the TV show, so you call us every name in the book, that kind of thing. That does not stay.
That viral video that went out of the meteorologist yelling at people because they wanted to watch a reality show, and he was doing tornado warnings. We had that talk in the newsroom several times. Is those thoughts have come across our mind, is that we've got people in danger in our viewing area. This is part of our job. He just happened to say it on television that time.
And I'll be on. I support his thoughts. I think he'd probably even say in the middle of a tornado warning, where's a confirmed tornado too?
Yeah.
It wasn't like, well, we're waiting for the next scan, the rotation's weak, and in my professional opinion, where you can add those extras. That's probably the wrong place for it. And I know I can sit here behind this desk and say that, but I think just, between you and me and this podcast, I think that's not the right time to voice frustration. So I would say that. But I know exactly what he's thinking about. It's when a doctor delivers a bad diagnosis and gets yelled at, it's not his fault. He's doing his job. When a cop gives a ticket, it's not his fault. He's doing it. That kind of thing. So. But sometimes you get yelled at. Sometimes news anchors get yelled at.
Yeah, we do. It is hurricane season. As you talk to folks here, what's the one piece of advice you're giving to people in 2019? Is it Matthew in 2016 caused billions of dollars in damage? It was one kind of storm. Florence in 2018 caused $22 billion of damage. It was another kind of storm. Be prepared for anything? Is that what you're telling people?
That's a great message. I would say in the spirit of impacts, look at your space, look at your family, and determine your plan based around your vulnerability to specific impacts. Don't just be like, well, that would be a really bad storm if that was a Cat 3. Why? Do you have trees that you're not sure their lifespan, or where are they going to go, maybe they do go if it's 2 days of Cat 1 winds versus 6 hours of Cat 3 winds. Those are impacts. Trees falling are impacts. Are you vulnerable? Do you live in a floodplain or even near a floodplain? I would hope that Matthew and Florence have well articulated where those new floodplains are. By extension, could you imagine if we had something worse than Florence? I can't imagine that.
No, I can't.
3 feet of rain in 3 days, and some of those at least 2 feet of rain. So I would hope we're not going to get tested even worse. But you have to think about that. You have to think, well, if Florence did that, then it can happen again. That's an impact. So I would say, yeah, our tornado plan, Florence produced an inordinate amount of tornadoes, much more than a usual tropical system. So those are impacts. Frame your plan around impacts.
And we're better prepared, though, in 2019 than we ever have been, do you believe?
I think Florence tested our coping skills pretty well. And so I think, yeah, we could say we went through that, so at least we can take that information and roll it into preparedness. I would say so.
Yeah. 2019 hurricane season is going to go on. You're planning some more of those community chats to get out and talk to people, right?
Yeah, we haven't solidified where this next one's going to be within Burgaw, but it's going to be in Burgaw to kind of be co-located with Highway 6 and the Blueberry Festival. So we'll be figuring that out within the next day or two, and then we hope to see you in Burgaw. It's really chill. I like it because we can just have a conversation like this, face to face.
Yeah.
And it's a neat way to reach out.
And any questions, all questions are good questions. Don't ever be afraid to ask a question when it comes to something like that, because that could be the one question that saves a life.
Yeah, I think so. A lot of people have so many great questions and anecdotes, and one guy was telling me from a hurricane in the 90s. He's like, I left, and he lived on Pleasure Island, and he's like, I came back and there was wind-blown sand packed into my keyhole. I couldn't get back into my house because it was packed with sand. I'm like, what a story. I never thought of that. You know, you think about all questions and comments and stories. It's just, so now I'm telling people to expect the unexpected because of these interactions.
Anything people want to know about getting prepared for the 2019 hurricane season, they can find right on the WECT.com weather page and on our mobile app weather page too, right?
That's right. The Hurricane Center is on the app because a lot of people like those hurricane guides that we would physically hand out. That stopped a couple of years ago, but we do place every one of those elements on the website at WECT.com/hurricane. And so some people told me they've actually printed a lot of stuff out. Mm-hmm. They just like the hard copy of something in the drawer, and so that's an option there. But yes, it is comprehensive.
All right. Gannon, appreciate it.
Yeah, this was cool.
We affectionately call him G-Med in the newsroom, G-Med. We've shared a lot of common stories in the years that you've been here. It's really good to have you as the leader of our weather team here. It's a comfort for many of us to know, because you'll bust your behind when the time comes, and that's a comfort for many of us.
Well, thank you. Well, right back at you in terms of what you bring to our newsroom, and I would just have to spread that love down to the team, because they have our back. They have everybody's back collectively. It's a good team.
It is.
Yeah.
Thanks, man. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. A big thank you to WECT Chief Meteorologist Gannon Medwick for coming in and not just sharing his weather expertise, but letting us go behind the scenes and learn more about the man that you turn to for your morning forecast, and that we all turn to when it comes time to prepare for hurricanes. Before we go, I'd like to ask you once again, please subscribe to the One-on-One with John Evans podcast and leave us a rating or a review if you would. We really do like to know what you think of our product. The more reviews and ratings we get, the higher we'll be listed on all the podcast apps, and the more new listeners we can bring in. I'm John Evans. Thanks so much for joining us for this episode of One-on-One.